Hi VC, hi YouTube, it's Rob here with another video, and this video I'm going to be showing 5 new releases from this year, and then I've got about 5 or 6 other things to show, so better get cracking. So the first album I'm going to show came out, I think it came out maybe about 4 months ago, and it's Gary Olsen. So who's Gary Olsen? Gary Olsen was in a band called Ladybug Transistor, who were from Brooklyn, and I never heard of them before. I saw Sam, the Vinyl Deuce, show this album probably about 6 months ago, so I took a little bit of interest, and then I saw Steve Carlton show it as well, and he enjoyed it, and I streamed this album for quite some time. Which is what I do before I make a purchase, and the more I listened to it, the more I really enjoyed it. So it's quite a lush sounding album, quite a lot of strings in it, but when I'm listening to it, it does sort of take me back to the sound of Prefab Sprout, Steve McQueen. It has that kind of feel about it, so I'm a big fan of that album, and the more I play this album, the more I really like it, and when I do my top 10 albums from 2020, Gary Olsen is guaranteed to be in the top 10. So yeah, Gary Olsen. Okay, another new album is this one, The Universal Want, by the Manchester band Doves. So this came out a couple of months ago. It comes with a nice inner, and it's on white vinyl. So the Williams brothers and Jimmy Goodwin, the Doves at the beginning of the 2000s, they couldn't do any wrong. A couple of #1 albums, really successful. A band who I never ever got to see live for whatever reason. A couple of years ago, they started to, because they had a bit of a hiatus, probably for 12 or 13 years. But they started to tour a little bit, do a few festivals, and then when I heard this album was coming out, I sort of, I was a little bit apprehensive. Listening to it, there's probably 5 tracks on here that fit comfortably on any Doves album. A couple of tracks a little bit weaker, but it's a good album. Really recommend the new album by Doves. Last week I was in a record shop. Record shops are springing up all over the place. You know, it's really nice to see. And even though in the UK we're going into another lockdown, which could last probably until mid-December, and then everyone's going to meet their families, and yeah, we'll probably have another lockdown at the beginning of February, but you know, that's the world we're living in. So I was in this relatively new record shop in Bury, which is 8 miles outside of Manchester. And it's called Wax and Beans, and I picked this album up last week. So the Gorillaz' new album, Song Machine, and you know, those of you who watch my channel know that I'm a fan of the Gorillaz, and this comes on, it looks like pink vinyl, but it says orange. So how do I rate this Gorillaz album? Well, for me, Plastic Beach is the best Gorillaz album. The last 2 Gorillaz albums have been good albums. I think maybe this is slightly better. I need to sort of play it a little bit more. When I bought it last week, I've played it about 4 or 5 times. Robert Smith from The Cure's on here, Beck, Lee John. Those of you of a certain vintage will know Lee John as a singer from Imagination, so it's nice to see him doing stuff. It's a good track that he does called The Lost Chord. Elton John's on here. That track is probably one of my least favourite Peter Hook is on side, the start of side 2 with a track called Aries, and unmistakable sort of New Order bass sound to that. Overall, a good album by the Gorillaz. Now, bought this album today actually, because of the impending lockdown. There's a new record shop opened in Upper Mill, which is in the foot of the Pennines, which is where I live really. So it's only a couple of miles away, and I've been in this record shop before, and a guy called Brett. And it's difficult trading conditions, and with the lockdown I thought I'd go and spend a little bit of money, so I picked up this album, Working Men's Club. So this album came out a couple of months ago, and it's a debut album by Working Men's Club, who are from Halifax, which is about 15 miles away from me. It's in West Yorkshire. And this is a very retro sounding album. It's very early 80s sounding. When I first started to stream it, immediately I liked it. Got a little bit of a early Human League feel about it as well. There's a track on here called John Cooper Clarke, but a very promising debut album by a band from Halifax called Working Men's Club. And the last new album I'm going to show is by a band who are from where I actually live, a place called Mosley, and the band is called Cabbage, and the album is called, I'm not going to even pronounce that, but it's a type of poisonous mushroom, and this comes on a really nice splattered vinyl. So who are Cabbage? Cabbage had quite a little bit of success about 3 years ago, but they never sort of had a decent sort of record contract, and it's difficult times for new bands. It's not easy to get a contract these days, so they've actually self-financed this album. 3,000 copies got snapped up pretty quick. I mean, the members of the band are doing jobs, you know, driving around in vans, delivering double glazing, etc. They live very local to me. I didn't buy this album out of sentiment. I streamed it and enjoyed it, but I thought I'd better snap it up quick because there's only 3,000 copies. It's very much in the mould of a little bit sort of King Gizzard. Maybe a little bit more punky, but very good album by a band from Mosley called Cabbage. Now I've got a few older records to show, and the first one I'm going to show is this one, and it's Spectrum by Billy Cobham. So I was in my favourite record shop in New Mills in Derbyshire, and I looked through the new arrivals like I always do, and I saw this. It's on Atlantic. I'm not sure what year this is from. I think it's 75, 74. I knew that Billy Cobham was sort of a jazz drummer. I played this for the first time yesterday, and my cats were asleep pretty close to the record player, and I put this on quite loud, and they soon got up and woke up. It wasn't quite what I expected. It's kind of rock jazz fusion, if you like. A couple of the tracks were quite a surprise to me, but I know that the more I spin this, the more I'm going to get into it. It's very sort of highly regarded, and yeah, I'm really happy to have it in my collection. Spectrum by Billy Cobham. Now, in the UK, occasionally I see people showing 2-for albums, which is what they used to do in the 70s and maybe in the 80s. You get 2 records for the price of 1. And I saw this in the racks, and I had no idea what it was. But then I saw Neil Young name mentioned. So this was £11, and it's the debut album, Neil Young. and his second album, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. So for 11 quid, I thought it was quite a good buy. I am a fan of Neil Young. I've got quite a lot of his records, but it wasn't until maybe about 20 years ago that I really started to sort of dip my toe into Neil Young, because he never sort of had sort of chart success in the UK, so I never really gave him that much time, but I got a greatest hits and I really enjoyed that, and I've been picking up his vinyl over the last few years, and I've got quite a bit, but I'd not actually heard these albums. It comes as no surprise, very strong albums, so really pleased to pick these two albums up for 11 quid. Neil Young. Right, I've got an album here that I know a lot of people don't like, but I've always liked it, and it's from Langley Park to Memphis by Prefab Sprout. So this is an album that I had back in I think it was about 88. Comes with the lyrics. There's Kitchenware Records. So this was a follow-up to Steve McQueen, and it's very different from Steve McQueen, but when it came out I loved it. But it has got sort of it's quite polished, and I'd not listened to this album for quite some time. Like I said, I did buy it in 88, but I think my ex-wife has it. It's one that I didn't manage to take with me. Side one on this album is very strong. Cars and Girls was like a debut single, and that was very having a little bit of a swipe at Bruce Springsteen at the time, but I always loved Cars and Girls. But The King of Rock and Roll was such a big hit single, but it was a bit of an albatross around Prefab Sprout's sort of career, because if you ask a man in the street, name a Prefab Sprout song, most people will name The King of Rock and Roll. And it's not a song that I've really got a lot of fond memories of, because I just got sick of it. I Remember That, Enchanted, Nightingales, side one's very strong. Hey Manhattan is such a lush song as well. It does sort of tail off a little bit at the end of the album, loses its way a little bit, but I've got a lot of fond memories of from Langley Park to Memphis by Prefab Sprout. A few more to go, and I picked up Liquid Skin by Gomez. So this is an album that I've always liked. I always wanted it on vinyl. It's been reissued. It's on 2 discs. Bit of a story about Gomez. So I go to Sheffield quite a bit to see my son, and there's a record shop there called the Record Collector, which featured on a film which came out probably 15 years ago, all about independent record shops in the UK. And Barry, the owner, figures quite heavily in that documentary. I think it's on YouTube. And I was speaking to Barry at the beginning of the year, had a nice chat, very engaging. And we got talking about Gomez, and he said Gomez went to university in Sheffield. He used to go in his shop, and they brought a tape in because he knew that he was friends with John Peel. He gave the tape to John Peel. They went down, did a session, got a contract, won the Mercury Prize Award. I don't think they ever bettered this album. Sort of blues, indie, dirty rock, really. Very distinctive and very good. So yeah, Liquid Skin by Gomez. 2 to go. And an album that everybody hates. There's a Style Council and The Cost of Loving. Again, this is an album that I bought at the time, but has been lost. So I saw it for £8 and I thought, what a bargain. There's a Style Council. DC Lee, who Paul Weller married, Mick Talbot and Steve White, great drummer. So when this album came out, I think it was 87, and I can remember the anticipation because Cafe Bleu was such an experimental album, but it was successful. Our favourite shop was a much more, had more purpose about it, felt like an album. and was very successful. And when this hit the racks, the record company were not keen on the packaging. Doesn't really say what it is. Call it the Orange Album, but I've always liked it. It does suffer from very 80s sound. Heavens Above is one of my favourite Style Council tracks. Fairy Tales, Curtis Mayfield was involved in that track. But The Cost of Loving, Waiting, even It Didn't Matter, Walking the Night, I've always liked this album, and I've sort of re-evaluating the Style Council in the 80s. You know, I'm not going to hide from the fact that, you know, I worship Paul Weller, but as the 80s came to an end, other musicians sort of, you know, got my attention, and the Style Council, you know, I've not really been listening to them over the last 20 years really, even though I love them so much. But I've sort of reappraising them, listening to them again, listening to this album. There was a documentary on Sky recently that I really enjoyed, and yeah, you gotta love the Style Council. So yeah, Cost of Loving by the Style Council. And the last album I'm going to show is an album I picked up for £2. John Miles, and this is kind of like a best of. So John Miles, still alive, 71, from Jarrow up in the northeast, and in 1975 we had Bohemian Rhapsody and I'm Not in Love, two massive number ones, but we also had Music, which was a number 3 hit, and for me it sort of fits in that sort of category of songs that, you know, a lot of people hate because it was just overplayed. But I always like Music. It sort of has about 4 different songs and it keeps changing, and I always really liked it. And there's a track on here called Slow Down, which I can remember being in the record shop with my pocket money, and I was going to buy All Around the World by The Jam or Slow Down by John Miles, and I bought Slow Down because, you know, and I still love that song, and when I played it off this album, you know, memories came back, and it's just such a great sort of funky tune. But John Miles, he never really did anything sort of after the mid-70s. There's a couple of tracks. High Fly was a single, and Manhattan Skyline is another great song. You see John Miles albums, you know, in the bins for £1 or £2. I'm not saying they're worth picking up, but as a best of, I thought it was a nice find. So yeah, John Miles. So that's it. A few new things, a few old things. I mean, I've probably got 150 albums that I've not shown on the VC. Really do need to do a few more videos. If you're a new subscriber to my channel, thanks for subscribing, really appreciate it. If you're an old subscriber, thanks for hanging in there. If you want to make a comment, I'll always get back to you. Best thing about, you know, doing videos and being on the VC is the interaction. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.